Hello everyone and welcome back to Affinity for Commander. My name is Alex and today for you we have a game involving a token generating vampire, a life stealing vampire, some 5-colour shenanigans, and a deck of value ETBs. But just before we start guys, remember that if you like any of the cards you see in this video, then you can get 10% off any orders over $10 at Flipside Gaming by using the promo code Affinity at the checkout. Or if any of these lovely places are more your thing, then be sure to check out our affiliate links in the description box below. Doesn't cost you anything extra, and it really helps the channel out a lot. And in this video you may also notice that mine and Martin's commanders look a little bit different. Yes indeed, they have been outfitted with some lovely perfect fit sleeves, courtesy of altersleeves.com. Thank you to Alter Sleeves for helping us with this promotion. And speaking of people that help the channel out a lot, everything we do here at Affinity for Commander is made possible thanks to the support of our amazing patrons. You guys, keep being awesome. And now, onto the game. Matt is playing his Vito Thorn of the Dusk Rose deck. His deck seeks to drain out his opponents by gaining life, using aristocrat cards, and generally run us over with life-linked creatures. He keeps a starting hand of Phyrexian Reclamation, Phyrexian Arena, Null Priest of Oblivion, Sanguine Bond, Exsanguinate, and 2 Swamps.
Calvin is playing his Esika God of the Tree deck. His deck wants to take advantage of Esika's Flipside to cheat out as many planeswalkers as possible. Calvin's also running a lot of board wipes to protect his walkers, and even some hate cards to discourage people from messing with his super friends. His starting hand is made up of Rampant Growth, Karmic Justice, Toxic Deluge, Oko Thief of Crowns, Teferi Hero of Dominaria, Marsh Flats, and a Forest.
I am playing my Chulane Teller of Tales deck, with Chulane being outfitted with a lovely perfect fit sleeve courtesy of Alter Sleeves. I'm wanting to run low to the ground, ramp out quickly, and overrun people with value creatures. I keep an opening hand of Finehorn Elves, Nylea Keen-Eyed, Farhaven Elf, Bane of Progress, Toothy Imaginary Friend, Nimbus Maze, and Windswept Heath.
And finally, I am playing my Edgar Markov deck, who has also been outfitted with a lovely perfect fit sleeve. I'm looking to outvalue my opponents with tribal strategies, hit hard by buffing my team, and swarm the board thanks to Edgar's Eminence ability. I keep a starting hand containing Rakdos Charm, Gifted Aetherborn, Dark Imposter, Drana the Last Blood Chief, Unclaimed Territory, a Mountain, and a Swamp.
Matt is chosen to go first and plays a swamp before passing the turn.
Calvin plays Marsh Flats and passes to Alex.
In my turn, I play a Botanical Sanctum and then use it to cast Finehorn Elves. With nothing else to do, I pass to Martin.
I play an Unclaimed Territory naming Vampire, and then end my turn.
Matt plays yet another swamp and passes. Calvin responds by cracking his Marsh Flats, losing a life to put Indartha Triumph into play tapped. Calvin then moves to his turn.
Calvin plays a Forest and then casts Rampant Growth. Using the spell, he puts an island into play tapped, and then ends his turn.
In my turn, I play a Windswept Heath, and immediately sack the land to fetch you an untapped Temple Garden. I take 3 damage, and then cast Farhaven Elf. With the Elf's ability, I put a basic island into play.
Are you done ramping?
Not quite, but go ahead anyway.
For my turn, I play a Swamp and then cast Gifted Aetherborn. Edgar triggers, creating me a 1/1 vampire friend, and I then pass to Matt.
For his turn, Matt, in a surprise to no one, plays a swamp and then casts Phyrexian Arena. All tapped out, Matt ends his turn.
Calvin plays Command Tower and then casts Mystic Remora. Then, completely giving his deck's theme away, he also casts Karmic Justice. Out of mana, Calvin passes to Alex.
I play a Port Town, revealing an island to have it enter untapped. I then tap 4 to cast Nylea Keen-Eyed.
Very much not a creature.
Very much not a creature, but she does make things cheaper. Leaving my ever-fabled Path to Exile mana open, I end my turn.
In my turn, I play a Mountain and cast Maverin Fen, Dusk Apostle. Edgar triggers, putting another 1/1 vampire into play, and I then move to combat. Here I attack Alex with my Etherborn and Calvin with a token. No blocks are declared, Alex takes 2, Calvin takes 1, and I gain 2 life from my vampire's lifelink. I then remember my Apostle trigger, putting a 1/1 white vampire into play with lifelink. Happy with my first blood, I pass to Matt.
Matt draws an additional card in his turn and loses 1 life thanks to his arena. He plays another swamp and then casts his commander, Vito, Thorn of the Dusk Rose. Lacking anything else to cast, Matt ends his turn.
Calvin pays for his fishy enchantment in his upkeep and then plays a Misty Rainforest. Really needing people to stop having creatures, Calvin casts Toxic Deluge, paying 3 life. But my vampires...
Yeah, they're dead.
Aren't they already dead?
I am not getting into this discussion with you again.
Anyway, out of things to play, Calvin passes to Alex.
In my turn, I play an island and then cast my commander, Chulane, the Bearer of Tales.
Why am I marrying you again?
I don't know. Making the most of my mana, I then cast Birds of Paradise, triggering Chulane. I draw a card and then choose not to put a land into play.
You don't have any, do you?
I don't have any, no.
Ha.
Now out of mana, I pass to Martin.
For my turn, I play Windscarred Crag, gaining a life. I then cast Herald's Horn, naming Vampire with the artifact. As I cannot pay an extra 4 mana for the spell, Calvin draws a card from his Mystical Fish. Out of mana, I end my turn.
Matt draws an additional card and loses another life. He then plays Castle Lochwain and uses all his mana to cast Sanguine Bond.
Oh no.
Calvin again draws from his enchantment, and with nothing left to do, Matt passes to Calvin. In his end step, however, Calvin cracks his Misty Rainforest, losing a life to put Raugrin Triumph into play tapped.
Why do these things have such weird names?
Calvin then proceeds to his turn.
Calvin chooses not to pay the cumulative upkeep tax on his fish, sacrificing his enchantment. He then plays Savoy? Why are they all so hard to pronounce? He then plays Savoy Triumph and then uses 3 mana to cast Oko, Thief of Crowns.
Oko, oh no.
Calvin uses the Twinks +1 a bit. I should really read these scripts before I read them. Calvin uses the Twinks +1 ability to turn Alex's commander from a bear into a 3/3 elk.
But my bear?
Having not annoyed Alex enough yet, Calvin also plays Renin 6 and uses the Planeswalker's -1 ability to deal 1 damage to Alex's Birds of Paradise. Calvin then ends his turn, passing to a rather embittered Alex.
I untap and move straight to combat, attacking Renin 6 with my Elkified commander. The pair are destroyed and I move to my second main phase. Here I play a Canopy Vista which enters untapped, and then leaving all my mana up, pass to Martin.
I choose not to reveal the top card of my library with my Horn's ability, and then play a Swamp. Tapping 4 mana and paying 1 less, I cast Drana, the Last Blood Chief, who enters with a friend thanks to Edgar. Lacking any hasty creatures, I end my turn.
Matt draws his 2 cards and loses 1 life. He then plays a Bajuka Borg and uses the land's ETB to exile Calvin's graveyard. Using 4 mana, he then casts Erebos, God of the Dead. Having removed everyone else's life gain potential, Matt ends his turn.
In Calvin's turn, he +1s Oko, turning the God of the Dead himself into an elk. Wanting more hated planeswalkers, Calvin also casts Teferi, Hero of Dominaria. Alex, however, would like to respond to this. He casts Eldamri's Call, and using the tutor, he finds Mystic Snake, which he puts into his hand. Then, paying 1 less thanks to Nylea, he casts the snake, countering Calvin's Planeswalker. Teferi is put into the graveyard, and Calvin, now slightly put out, passes to Alex.
For my turn, I play a Nimbus Maze and then move to combat. Here I attack Oko for 5, hopefully setting the stage for Martin to get rid of the Ripped Elf.
He is pretty ripped, isn't he?
Calm down. In my main 2, I cast Toothy, Imaginary Friend, paying 1 less. And with their partner ETB trigger, I search my library for Pia, Imaginative Rascal. Not wishing to overcommit at this point, I pass to Martin.
In my upkeep, I use my horn to reveal Olivia Voldoran and put the vampire into my hand.
But Martin, where are her feet?
I then tap 5 mana and pay 1 less to cast my commander, Edgar Markov, who is looking pretty sweet drinking that angel's blood out of that goblet. Moving to combat, I attack with everything, my token going at Oko, Drana going at Alex, and Edgar going at Matt. Edgar triggers, putting a +1/+1 counter on all of my creatures, and I then use Drana's trigger to return Gifted Aetherborn from my graveyard to the battlefield, given that it's the only non-legendary creature in my bin. Aetherborn gains a +1/+1 counter, Oko is destroyed, Matt blocks with his Alk, and Alex takes 5 damage. With nothing more to do, I pass to Matt.
Matt loses a life and draws a card, and then plays a Radiant Fountain, gaining 2 life to offset some of the self-inflicted damage. This triggers his Exquisite Blood, draining the rest of us for 2 life. He then casts Obnixilis of the Black Oath and uses the Planeswalker's +2 ability, so we all lose 1 life and Matt gains 3. This then triggers his enchantment again, draining us all for another 3 life. Matt then taps his 2 remaining mana to play Null Priest of Oblivion with no kicker cost. Happy he's got a blocker, Matt passes to Calvin.
Calvin starts his turn by casting Supreme Verdict, which I am less than happy about.
I'm happy with it.
Oh yeah, you just want your commander not to be an elk.
Which I don't think is a lot to ask.
Fair. Once the dust settles, Calvin passes the turn, to which Alex responds by activating Nylea's ability. He reveals Llanowar Elves this way, and puts it into his hand before moving to his turn.
I start off by playing a forest and then recast my unbearably cute commander.
These bear puns need to stop.
Making the most while he's still around, I play a Llanowar Elves to draw a card. I don't put a land into play this way, and with nothing else to do, I pass to Martin.
In my upkeep, I reveal Twilight Prophet with my horn and put the vampire into my hand. I then cast Tear to blow up Matt's Sanguine Bond, and using my horn to make it cheaper, I cast Forerunner of the Legion. Edgar creates me a 1/1 friend, and I put Captivating Vampire on top of my library with my Forerunner's ability. Not yet finished, I cast Dark Imposter, again paying 1 less and creating another 1/1 vampire. Out of mana, I pass to Matt.
In Matt's turn, he draws 2 and loses 1 life. He then plays a Witch's Cottage as his land for turn, putting Null Priest back on top of his library with the land's ETB. Then, in a complete disregard for the board state, Matt casts Mutilate, giving all creatures -4/-4. With the board wipe now resolved, Matt then casts Heraldic Banner, naming black. Matt then pluses Obnix so we all lose 1 life and he gains 3. Still wanting more non-creature permanents, Matt casts Phyrexian Reclamation before passing the turn.
In Calvin's turn, he assembles his Wooburg Manor and casts his commander's back face, the Prismatic Bridge. Pleased with his play, Calvin ends his turn.
I, wanting in on this mass destruction fest, cast Bane of Progress. 6 artifacts and enchantments are destroyed this way, including Calvin's recently played Commander.
Ooh, that's gotta hurt.
I put 6 +1/+1 counters on my elemental this way, and Calvin's Karmic Justice then triggers. He chooses to destroy my Bane of Progress and Port Town.
Worth it though.
Oh, definitely. And with the board once again cleared, I pass to Martin.
In my turn, I draw my Captivating Vampire and then cast Olivia Voldoran. I create a 1/1 vampire and then, having not drawn any more land, pass to Matt.
Matt begins his turn by activating Obnixilis' -2 ability, creating a 5/5 demon with flying and losing 2 life. He then, needing more hate, casts Sorin Markov.
Hey, I'm the one playing vampires here.
We all wait with bated breath as Matt decides who to minus Sorin on. Matt chooses to target Martin!
Wait, what?
And now, with a ticked off Martin, Matt ends his turn. In his end step, however, Calvin casts Swords to Plowshares, targeting Matt's demon. Matt gains 5 life, and Calvin moves to his turn.
Calvin plays a Bayou as his land for turn and then recasts his bridge. Out of mana, Calvin passes to Alex.
In my turn, I cast Ashnod's Altar and then pass the turn.
Yeah, because that's not suspicious at all.
It's fine, don't worry about it.
For my turn, I cast Twilight Prophet and make a 1/1 vampire. Moving to combat, I attack up Nexus with Olivia and my non-summoning sick vampire, dealing him 4 damage. This will prevent him from -2ing to make another demon next turn, and happy with this, I end my turn.
Matt begins his turn by recasting his commander, Vito, Thorn of the Dusk Rose. He then +2 Sorin, dealing 2 damage to Calvin, and Matt gains 2 life. Vito then triggers and Matt again targets Calvin. Matt then pluses Obnix, so we all lose a single life each. Matt gains 3, and then uses Vito to drain Martin for a further 3.
Why is it always me?
I know, vampire hate. Happily sat on over 50 life, Matt passes the turn.
In Calvin's upkeep, Prismatic Bridge triggers, and he puts Norsen Transcendent onto the battlefield this way. Needing more Planeswalkers, Calvin then also casts Nicol Bolas Dragon God, and Alex responds to this with Plasm Capture. The Elder Dragon is countered, and feeling rather sorry for himself, Calvin ends his turn.
In my main one, I add 3 green, 1 white, and 1 blue to my mana pool thanks to Plasm Capture. Using this mana and paying 2 lots of tax, I recast my commander, Chulane, Teller of Tales. I then play a Hinterland Tower for my land for turn, and then paying 1 less thanks to Nylea, I cast Revelark. I draw from Chulane's ability and put a forest into play. Happy with my board state, I ask the table to bear with me and pass to Martin.
Right, that's it. That's enough bear puns. I play a Swamp, having finally drawn a land, and then cast Captivating Vampire, again creating a 1/1 vampire and granting me the city's blessing.
#blessed.
Next I tap 5 vampires to activate Captivating Vampire's ability and gain control of Matt's commander. Yoink.
Harsh.
Still not finished, I cast Vindicate, targeting and destroying the Prismatic Bridge.
Double harsh.
Moving to combat, I attack Obnixilus with my Olivia for 4 damage. In response, Matt casts Sudden Spoiling, turning all of my creatures into 0/2s. Obnixilus is dealt 0 damage, and happy to have annoyed half the table, I end my turn.
Matt starts his turn off by -3ing Sorin to this time make Calvin's life total 10.
Never seen this happen twice in one game.
Matt then pluses Obnix to drain us all for 1 and give himself 3 more life. Then for 2 black and X being 7, Matt casts Exsanguinate.
Oh dear.
The rest of the table plead for me to stop this by sacrificing my Revelark to bring back my Mystic Snake. But instead, channeling my inner Dr. Kim, I decide I'm going to allow this. Martin does a die, Calvin and I lose 7, and Matt gains 21 life. And with Martin out of the way, Matt's commander returns to his control. Out of mana and with a bloated life total, Matt passes to Calvin.
Calvin, in an extremely ballsy move, plays Mana Confluence as his land, and then upticks Narset. From this, Calvin reveals Farseek, and then taps 5 mana to cast Urza's Ruinous Blast. Alex, not wanting to lose his altar, sacrifices his Revelark to the artifacts, generating 2 colourless mana. This triggers the Orc's ability, returning Toothy Imaginary Friend and Mystic Snake to the battlefield. With the Snake CTB, Alex uses to counter the Ruinous Blast, saving his precious altar. Calvin, not wishing to die just yet, taps 3 mana including Mana Confluence, losing half his life and casts Fairy's Protection. Calvin and his board phase out of existence, and Alex responds before the phase has passed to use his 2 floating mana and 1 green to activate Nylea's ability. From this he reveals Glacial Fortress, which he chooses to put into the grave before moving to his turn.
In my turn, I untap and draw, which puts a counter on Toothy. I pay 1 less and cast Pia Imaginative Rascal. This triggers Chulane, so I draw a card and Toothy gets another counter. I then cast Karametra, God of Harvests, triggering Chulane again. So I draw a card and put a Hallowed Fountain into play tapped with the Bear's ability. With Pierre now on the battlefield, Toothy gets 2 additional counters, and Nylea is also now a creature. Moving to combat, I swing Nylea and Toothy at Mats of Nixilis. Matt declares no blocked and the Planeswalker is destroyed.
Finally.
For my main 2, I sacrifice Toothy to Ashnod's Altar. This generates me 2 colourless mana and lets me draw 4 cards. I also then sacrifice my Sneck to the altar to generate a further 2 mana, and use all this floating mana to cast Sun Titan. I draw from Chulane and put a Selesnya Sanctuary into play, returning a basic forest to my hand. With my Sun Titan trigger, I put Farhaven Elf into play. To save time, I do both my Farhaven Elf and Karametra trigger together, putting a basic Plains and Forest into play tapped. I then use my last 2 floating generic mana to cast Simic Signet, and realise that Karametra is also now a creature.
You done?
Well, I'm out of mana, so yes. I, finally having a respectable board state, pass to Matt, who still has 5 times my life total.
Matt starts his turn by recasting his Null Priest. He then passes to Calvin with a lot of open mana.
Calvin phases back in, untaps, and Matt stops him in his upkeep to cast Tendrils of Corruption. With the spell in the stack, Matt makes a deal with me.
That is a terrible decision. No one should ever make deals with you.
He asks me not to sacrifice the target of his spell so that he can kill off Calvin. I ask him how many cards he has in hand, to which he responds, 2, and I like those odds. Matt targets my Karametra and I declare no responses. The god shrugs off the damage and Matt gains 5 life and uses his Vito to drain Calvin for the rest of his life total. Now sitting atop 80 life, Matt passes to me.
Alex untaps and moves straight to combat, swinging in at Matt with Nylea, Karametra and Sun Titan. Sun Titan triggers, and Alex puts Birds of Paradise into play with the Titan's ability. Matt blocks Nylea with his Priest, and then damage occurs. Matt takes 11 from the gods, but gains 2 from his Priest and drains Alex for 2 life with Vito's ability. Moving to his post-combat main phase, Alex casts Avenger of Zendikar. He draws from Chulane and puts Rejuvenating Springs into play with the Teller of Tales ability. Alex then creates 12 0/1 plant tokens with the Avenger's ETB, and plays a Flooded Strand as his land for turn, putting a +1/+1 counter on each of his plants. Alex then sacrifices his Farhaven Elf to his altar for 2 colourless mana, which he uses to help cast a very on-curve Rhystic Study. Really not being efficient with his mana,
Hey!
Alex also activates Nylea's ability, revealing a land which he puts into the grave. Confident that he can still win this, Alex passes the turn.
In Matt's turn, for his best efforts to drain me out, he casts Pontiff of Blight. He does not pay the 1 for my study, allowing me to draw a card. Matt then casts Swiftfoot Boots, extorting the spell, and once again not paying the 1. I draw another card, and in response to the extort trigger, I cast Path to Exile, targeting Vito. Matt's command is replaced with a basic Swamp, and I lose 1 and Matt gains 1 from the extort trigger finally resolving. Out of mana, Matt then passes to me, to which I respond by cracking my Flooded Strand to put an island into play, which puts 2 +1/+1 counters on my plant army thanks to Pia. I then move to my turn.
In his turn, Alex plays a basic forest and puts another 2 +1/+1 counters on his plant tokens. Wait, shouldn't they have 6 counters on them with Pia in play?
You're quite right, dear. Whatever would I do without you?
Starve.
True.
Finally playing his deck correctly, Alex taps 3 to activate Chulane, bouncing his Birds of Paradise to his hand, and then replays it. Chulane triggers and Alex draws a card and puts Simic Growth Chamber into play, bouncing a forest to his hand. This puts another 2 +1/+1 counters on his plant tokens, meaning that they are now 12 8/9s. Satisfied with the size of his trees, Alex moves to combat, where he attacks Matt with his army of plants and gods. This reduces Matt's life total to less than 0, securing victory for Alex.
And the plants win out of nowhere. Oh. Sorry. Yes, commiserations to Matt and to Calvin, and I suppose to Martin as well. But, you know, he was right about one thing. You really should never make a deal with me. And that will be the end of the video, guys. I hope you enjoyed it. Whatever your thoughts, leave them in the comments below. We read every single one of them. As always, you can follow us on Twitter @4commander, or if you really like us, you could consider becoming a patron of the channel yourself for access to exclusive EDH related rewards. Thank you again to Altsleeves for sending us these lovely pieces of art for our favourite commanders. And with that, all that's left to say is that I have been Alex, and I will see you next time.